Hey everybody, I'm back once again. We're going to take a look at something a little bit different. Today I'm painting a bust, and I actually painted this live on my Twitch stream. You can check out the links down below. But this bust is going to be a demonstration piece for a class I'm teaching this November at Warfare Weekend. So you're going to see exactly what I'm going to show that class here on YouTube for free. Alright, we're going to start off real simple. We're going to use some Secret Weapon Purple Wash, and we're going to mix that down with a 50-50 mix of Merlin's Magic Medium, good grief, from Cuttlefish Studios, and this will be applied to the skin tones. Now, I did it a bit thin, so I might want to do one or two layers as I go, and I can add a little bit as I go, but we're going to hit all of the skin that it's exposed. So the ears, the face, the lips, the tongue, anything that's exposed that is skin and flesh, and we're going to get it in there in the eyes. We're going to hit it with that. Now, the Merlin's Magic Medium gives us a nice long dry time, so we can keep working with it and make sure it gets into all the recesses. And I'll just keep rotating the model as we go along here. Alright, now that we've got that down, we're going to do something a little different with the hair. We're going to use some Citadel contrast. And this is Volupus Pink. Volupus? I don't know where they get these names. I keep thinking voluptuous, but it's spelled weird. Who knows? Let's make his hair pink. That sounds way more fun than figuring out how to say words. One of the things that I really want to point out on this is to make sure that we get this pink into all of the shadows and recesses on the back and the bottom of the bust. We're doing this for a reason. Even though this doesn't show up very well in the end, your eye is going to pick this up, and it's also going to build other colors on top of it a little bit more easily. You'll see this a little bit better as this model dries during the painting process, but this is really important. This is the basis of saturating your shadows. Now you can see we have a very purple and pink dwarf. Well, let's make him look a little bit less purple and pink, I guess. The next major step that we're going to do is using a bit of Vallejo's Xpress Color Imperial Yellow. Now this is a pretty deep yellow, and we're going to use this over the skin tone to make an interesting kind of neutral tone. These two complementary colors are going to form the basis of our skin tone for our dwarf bust. So we're just going to apply a layer over the purple that we had, and we want to make sure that it gets into all of the recesses and nooks and crannies. And we don't need to go overboard on it, we just need probably about a single layer here unless it looks a little too thin. Again, this applies to the ears, the face, the lips. We're going to leave the tongue and the teeth alone. Just try not to touch those with anything at this point because we're going to use the color that we already set up later. You probably noticed by now that I'm using a lot of washes, shades, contrast, etc. I really like using these kind of paints for base tones and doing tinting and shading and stuff, and this is going to set us up for doing some detail work with some more traditional acrylic paints here in just a moment. Oh wow, and look at all that. We applied our next paint, which is German Field Gray from Vallejo. Now I did this over the tops of the hair, and you can see I went over kind of the top sections of it, excluding more of the bottom. So as I turn the model around, you'll notice that the lower portions of the hairs where there's less light are getting less of the gray, and the gray is laying over it in kind of a neutral ruddy tone. This is kind of a transition tone that I'm using here to build up to a much lighter color. That German Field Gray is a little bit greenish as well, which works really well for what we need. So at this point, I'm using a bit of Citadel Druchii Violet to emphasize some of the shadows here. I'm using my finger to pick up some excess. You should really use a brush or a sponge or towel or something like that, but I'm inclined to take my chances and tear my paint. It can happen. It happens. But using this and a little bit of the Volupus pink, I'm going to add some shadow in and around the face. Remember, our face was based with purple, so we're using a violet, a dark violet, to add some more shade back into it after we've brought it up with the yellow. We're getting some much more natural, kind of bronzy skin tones at this point. Yeah, we can do a little bit of... That was a weird noise. Alright, now that I'm done dyeing, we're going to add some Citadel Dorn Yellow to the tops of these hairs. Now this is a very high value yellow. It's almost white, but it's still pretty yellow, and then interacting with both the underlying pink and field gray, we're going to get a very interesting kind of grayish neutral tone hair for our dwarf. He's going to look a bit aged, minus a few details here. So just spread this on the topmost of the tufts. Use the side of your brush to hit the very edges of those hairs. We're going to focus on where the light is striking the hair most, mostly from the top and slightly from the front, kind of highlighting the face area. We want everything to focus around the face. Don't forget to add little details to smaller parts of the model, such as the eyebrows here, and the mustache and ears, and little things that can kind of get lost in the hair and the model as a whole. Remember, we have those teeth and tongue still to work on, so avoid those until we're ready. I didn't have as much shade as I wanted to, or saturation, so I'm just bringing in some more of that Secret Weapon Purple Wash again. If you don't have access to this paint, since it's no longer in production, you might be able to make something very similar out of a purple paint. I would use something along the lines of a flow improver or drying retardant from someone like Cuttlefish Studios. Their Merlin's Magic Medium is fantastic, or even Liquitex. Mixing that with a little bit of water and some paint, you can make some very interesting washes. If you don't have quite the tone that you need straight out of the bottle, it's a great way to kind of mix your own, or just get close enough. Alright, it's a little off camera here, but I'm hitting the tongue with some of that Volupus pink from before, so it should have the purple and now the pink on top of it, and that's going to give us a nice deep reddish pink tone for the tongue. We can leave it at that. Try to avoid the teeth. Alright, for this next part we're going to start blending in some Stegadon Scale Green. We're going to go ahead and coat over the pink areas of the mohawk and the braids that we haven't really blended up because we don't need them. But having that pink underneath is a pretty strong base tone, and our Stegadon Scale Green will layer over it pretty well. We want a nice solid layer, so get it in there, get it in between all of the hairs, and just let it dry here before we move on to our next step. We're going to blend in some Screamer Pink, also from Citadel here, and we're going to do the top part of the mohawk and kind of just blend that in, and we're also going to hit some of the braids. You're going to need to blend back and forth with a little bit of the Stegadon Scale Green and the Screamer Pink, and that's okay. Mixing them together on your palette is okay for some mid-tones to go between, and you can also work them wet on the model if you like as well. I tend to like to work with a little bit of wet paint on the model, so having both at the ready is good on your palette. Alright, next we're going to take some Citadel Ahriman Blue. I like this straight out of the pot. Sometimes you can just lighten up the Stegadon Scale Green, but this one's a nice solid color. And we're going to hit the tops of the braids here where they're still braided and getting hit by light. And then where they're still blue and getting hit by light, excuse me, I'm leaving that in, screw the edit, hi mom. And then I am going to move on and do the braids as well as the mohawk itself. Use the side of your brush and try to hit the sides of the hairs, the individual hairs, and the tops of the braids, the little knotty parts. Next thing we're going to do is bring in some Emperor's Children pink. Again, just like the Ahriman's blue, you could technically bring in a lighter color and mix and blend, but I'm going to keep it simple and use the paint straight out of the pot here. I'm going to keep to the edges of the hairs on the mohawk and the tops of the knots on the braid where it's pink, of course, just like with the blues. The hardest part about this entire model is going to be adding highlights to the skin. We're going to use Scale 75's Moonray Flesh here. Now this is kind of an off-white peachy tone, and what I'm doing here is I'm stippling and dabbing on the paint, kind of drawing small sketches and lines and dots, and then I am dabbing them away a bit with my finger. You can use a brush or something along that lines to do the same, but I actually kind of like doing it this way because it adds a little bit of randomized texture to it. But the idea is to make little spots and points on the skin that are going to look like imperfections, wrinkles, etc., that the light is reflecting off of and around. Just as with all highlights, remember to focus on areas that have the most amount of light hitting them, like the nose, the tip of the nose, the nostril. You see we've hit the cheek, a certain part of the head, which is a little bit more lit, the forehead there, and the lips here, we'll hit those a little bit too, just right there. And you can even bring in a little bit of Moonray Flesh on the eye. You can see we've done that with the sclera of the eye. This has a hollow pupil, so it makes it kind of easy there. And we can also hit the teeth with a little bit of that too, just to bring them out. So with that done, we can move on to the base. I've done something really simple here. I've kind of washed down the base with a bit of our Stegadon Scale Green, just a quick layering here over a black primer, and now I'm actually stippling on a bit of our Emperor's Children Pink, and I'll use some of our blue, our Ahriman's blue here as well to stipple on and give this a little bit of texture before I kind of wash and glaze over it. And with a little bit of Imperial yellow over pink, I've created a brown tone, which I've used some Dorn yellow to highlight and create a simple non-metallic gold for the gold buckles around the braids. Yeah. I really like projects like these, especially laying out what I've done and constructing these into sort of a lesson plan. It's been a really great exercise in thinking about what I'm doing and kind of structuring out my projects in a little bit more of a structured way, so they're prioritized as far as what paint do I apply first, and that really helps me get comfortable with painting a mini I've just looked at. And if you'd like to learn how to paint this mini in person with a live demonstration this November at Warfare Weekend, please make sure to check out my class, link below, and let's take a look at our final product.